Welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Tuesday, July 6th, 2021, and today we're going to be discussing the 2022 U.S. gubernatorial races from all across the country. So, these races are actually really interesting, and while they might not have a big nationwide impact, per se, they're not going to have an impact on what happens to the whole country. For individual states, it shows us two big things: where a lot of these states are trending, and second of all, what direction have they chosen and what policies might be implemented in individual states. So this is going to be a very interesting prediction to take a look at, as there's many races. And just to be honest, this is the governor elections during midterm years are some of my favorite races to cover, just because of how varied, diverse, and so broad they are, because you don't really know, you can't expect something in a state and then just go to another state, expect the same thing. So this is our starting off map. But before we do start this prediction, I want to remind you guys to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So I'm going to start by filling in Democratic safe states and talking a little bit about them as we go. So, we have your regular states that are just, always Democratic. Some of these states are actually not as for one party as some people may think, though. It's important to notice that in the gubernatorial space, there is a lot of races that, frankly, do fall somewhere, that's not really going to, people don't expect. Especially if you look at things through the party perspective, where you say, well, this is a Republican state, so a Republican should win here. Big thing there is should. I mean, it's not really guaranteed that the Republican or Democrat is going to win there, because they should. Remember, these races are just very diverse in a way that, at the end of the day, it's really more about the individual candidates and what they believe, their beliefs, and how far they can appeal to certain groups of voters, rather than the whole party thing, that, oh, it's the Democrats are just gonna blow it out here. So that's something that we see during these races. And on this map, we also have the Virginia, New Jersey races. I really think that, I'm gonna cover these beforehand, because, as you know, these are not 2022 governor races, but I think Virginia would be somewhere in the likely, and New Jersey as well. So I'm just going to get rid of those right now so we can continue on to the 2022 predictions. As far as other states goes, I mean, I really think that in Illinois, New York, some of these races we do need to talk about because of the primary aspect that, some of these races, the people who are there, the governors, or, the more... or the challengers, there's going to be primary aspects, especially in New York. In New York, it's really going to come down to Andrew Cuomo's popularity and seeing if he's able to, hold on to, a lot of those governor seats. I really think that for him, especially, I think that the pandemic was kind of a high point, but also a low point. And you have some very strong Republican challengers, actually. Lee Zeldin and former New York City mayor's son, Andrew Giuliani. And, I don't think these races are going to have such a big impact just because of how New York is. However, there is that possibility that perhaps, maybe it does happen. As far as everything else goes, we'll get into it later, because this is where I think the Democrats, that's going to be their top. There's certain races that, they could actually do somewhat well and they could win by, big margins. But, there's other races that the Republicans are going to get close. As for the Republicans, I mean, you're going to see them do very well in this region of the country. Kansas, we need to talk about later. Oklahoma's fine. Arkansas is very Republican. It could fit that role. Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, I want to talk about later. These two, of course, we have to talk about later. I think we should talk about Ohio a little bit later. That's not going to be safe. Alaska, I do think will be safe for the Republican Party. Even though some strong Democrats might come in and vote, or even ranked choice voting might have something to do in this race, I think at the end of the day, Alaska's just Republican to the point where the Democrats have good candidates once and every while. And to have a good candidate, I mean, it really comes down to that. That's why Democrats have actually won in races in Alaska. It comes down to who the candidate is. And at this point, Alaska looks like it will be going Republican. So the rest of these states are really up for grabs. So we're not going to start getting into them by discussing the Democratic likely states. So let's start off with the state of Minnesota. So Minnesota right now is, strongly Democratic. The incumbent governor is actually Tim Walz, and he's actually really popular. So I see that going to a likely margin for them. Going on to other places around the country, Michelle Lujan Grisham in New Mexico, I think she's going to do great. She has that support from her base. And, New Mexico has been just showing us that it's been trending a little bit more blue in certain areas, but in other areas, the Republicans have regained the popularity they once had. Most notably when we just saw a House race there, Yvette Herrell, we saw her win in that race. So I think that New Mexico is going to be a little bit more trending Republican than it was in 2018. But I think we're possibly going to see the Democrats win this by a likely margin. Plus, Michelle Lujan Grisham really appeals to the voters in that state very, very well. Going on with the state of Maryland. So this state, I think, is going to end up being likely just for the reason that Larry Hogan was very popular here, and even though he's not on the ticket, perhaps I really think that the Democrats are going to end up winning here, but it's going to be a little bit less because the Republicans have gained somewhat. Certain types of Republicans are doing very well in Maryland, but this seat probably what I think is going to end up happening is probably going to end up going to Tom Perez. Very famous, Democratic figure. He was the head of the DNC, or of the Democratic Party for 2016. And I think at the end of the day, he's just going to do very well in this state. This is an establishment state in Maryland. And you're going to end up seeing the establishment win here just because of how the state is set up. So I think that Tom Perez will do good there. I think this covers all the Democratic likely states except Colorado. I forgot about that one. This is Jared Polis's seat. He's probably going to do very well here. I think that the Republicans really don't have that candidate that goes out and appeals to those, suburban voters that they need. And I think that Jared Polis does have that. So I think it's going to go to him. So this is where we stand. Now let's go on to the Republican likely states. So, of course, you're going to have Iowa and Ohio in these, Kim Reynolds in Iowa and Mike DeWine in Ohio. Ohio, we have to take a look at the primary because Jim Renacci, who ran for Senate in 2018, actually is challenging incumbent Governor Mike DeWine in this race. So the reality of that race is really up for grabs. And I think that at the end of the day, whoever ends up winning there, more likely than not, will go on to win the general election. And in the current stance of the country, the general federal influences, policy-wise, I think that the whole pandemic and economy are going to be fresh in people's minds. So those are going to be big issues. So especially for these governors who had to manage these crises, all by themselves in the smack middle of their terms. So in a lot of these states, where we're going to get into later, we're going to talk about that. But, Ohio and Iowa, solidly Republican. Those are going to end up going to the GOP. South Carolina, this is actually an interesting race because I think that one of the big things we should talk about here is that it's probably going to get closer because of southern and then the middle part of the state, which are predominantly African-American and, suburban. So I think that is something we must see. Now, Henry McMaster is running for his second full term. He's running for re-election because he replaced Nikki Haley in 2017 and ran for the first full term in 2018. And then, at the end of, this term, he gets to run for another second term. But in this race, it's interesting because you have Joe Cunningham. Joe Cunningham was a representative from South Carolina just in the last Congress who, got defeated by Nancy Mace in his congressional race. He is going on to run for governor, and I think that he might be somewhat influential in bringing South Carolina by a couple points down, where the Democrats might have a closer chance. Although the Republicans, at the end of the day, are probably just going to end up winning here, like they usually would. As far as everything else goes, again, up for grabs. It goes, I would push all of these into the lean margins. So let's start off with the Democratic lean margins. So let's start off with Maine. This is Janet Mills' seat. I think she's going to do very well there. New Hampshire and Vermont. I think that, these states are rather interesting because, these two states have the every 2 years governor election system. Chris Sununu, the governor in the state of New Hampshire, he is eligible to run, but he might run for U.S. Senate. So we don't know what's going to happen there. If Sununu runs, I would put this in at this point. I'm going to see that he will. The U.S. Senate, things for Sununu have not come in completely. That's just a rumor right now. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in the lean margin for the GOP. I think they're going to do very well in this state. As for that's the wrong state. Oops. But that would also apply to Vermont too because of Phil Scott. So I'm actually starting with the GOP. Phil Scott and Chris Sununu are just the face of moderate Republicans that could do well up north, and I think that this is going to be something good for the GOP, that they're going to be able to hold on to some of these seats. Now that we're with the GOP, I think Florida and Texas are going to end up going lean GOP, just based on the fact that, these states have been trending more Democratic. And while they have some Democratic bases growing in the states, Texas and Florida are probably going to end up being, with its conservative roots that, in the last couple of years, we've seen these seats become super conservative. And statewide races, presidential races, especially in Florida, Ron DeSantis will definitely defeat at this point not Val Demings, that's the Senate race. He will defeat Charlie Crist or Nikki Fried, and one of those two. So there's going to be a Democratic primary that's going to be very heated. Depending on who goes up to him, who goes against him, it's gonna get closer. With Charlie Crist, it's mostly based on the Tampa Bay area, that he will definitely have a little bit more appeal in that area of the state. And for Nikki Fried, it's going to be Northern Florida appeal. She's going to have that and probably be able to win a lot of the votes up north. So those are going to bring the margins down. But, Ron DeSantis is just, generally popular based on pandemic stuff. So I think that he's going to do great there. Now, in Texas, this race is interesting because there's an abundant amount of people who could run for this race. The big rumor right now is that, Matthew McConaughey will run for this race. At this point, I'm not really convinced, and if he does run, he's probably going to end up losing the race. Now, with Texas, I think one of the big things we need to look at is for them to get as close as they want to, they're going to have to run the right candidate. They're probably going to have to run a Beto O'Rourke or a Julian Castro to win this race. At this point in time, I think that Texans might be a little bit tired of Greg Abbott. It's going to be his third full term. At some point, Texans are just going to say, well, Greg Abbott, enough is enough. But Greg Abbott right now is mildly popular in the state. And then the Democratic Party needs to organize themselves if they do want the chance of winning that race, which at this point, it's a big question mark. So that is why I put Texas in the lean column for the Republicans. As for the Democrats, I think they're going to do very well up in the Midwest. Tony Evers in Wisconsin, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and in Pennsylvania. I think we're looking at, a couple of different people that could run. There is really not a big front runner in this race for the Democrats. We have former state treasurer Joe Trocella, Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney, and Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Those people could all run and probably make a win for the race. And then Lou Barletta is running for the Republican nomination. I think at the end of the day, the Democrats are probably going to end up winning here by around 2 or 3 points. That puts them in the likely margin in those races. So I think that's one of the big things we're going to be seeing in that state. Going on to the last states we have, these are going to be in the tilt margin. These are states that would go by less than 1.5%. So these are going to be the closest races. Let's start off with the state of Arizona. This race, it really comes down to a couple of things. One, where the state is feeling, and I think Arizona is going to be in a weird place in a way. I think that there's going to be a hotly contested race there just because of where the country is currently. As far as who could be the candidates, the big candidates are just State Treasurer Kimberly G, and then more likely than not the challenger for Kimberly Yee will probably be Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. So I think that here the Republicans do have a chance of winning, but I think the Democrats might narrowly carry it out. I mean, even though Kimberly Yee might have certain appeals, the Democrats probably have a bigger movement. And I think in a midterm year where they're likely to re-elect a Democratic senator, I think that you're looking at a race that really could go their way. Now, as far as the last couple of states that we have go, Nevada, Kansas, and Georgia. I mean, with these races, I think we're going to look at three things. So, in Nevada, I think it comes down to who runs. I mean, Steve Sisolak is a little bit popular. He's mildly popular. Now, the big thing is that who the Republicans run. It's going to come down to that. The big Republican names who could probably win this race are not running. So for those reasons, I'm currently putting it in the like tilt margin because we don't know. But I think it's more likely not going to end up going to the Democrats. Now, the last two states that will actually decide, I mean, not necessarily decide, it's going to put a tie or not in the National Governors Association is Kansas and Georgia. So out of the state of Kansas, I really think that incumbent Governor Laura Kelly will do a good job. Now, I think the Republicans are probably going to be able to win here. She's going to get this race to be closer because she's the incumbent governor and stuff. But I think it really comes down to that she won this race purely because the Republicans ran a horrible candidate in Chris Kobach. So this is where I'm going to give the state of Kansas to the Republicans. As far as who that would be, I mean, there's many people that could run for this seat. But, a lot of people say Schmidt and, those he could run for governor and probably win. Laura Kelly won very narrowly, and I think it's looking like it's probably going to end up going to the Republicans. And last, the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp. This is going to be an interesting race. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, Brian Kemp in Georgia is barely holding on because, the Republicans have lost a lot of the movement. He's a Trump-like Republican. And in the state of Georgia, that doesn't, that's not as popular as it once was. With, elevated African-American turnout and the possibility of Stacey Abrams running for the seat again, I think Stacey Abrams this time around could win this seat. And it's going to be great for the Democrats. So I really think that's where this race stands. They would probably win it very narrowly. And at the end of the day, this puts the Democrats at more governorships than they were before. 24 Republican governorships to 26 Democratic governorships. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up. Like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. Thank you guys so much for watching this prediction, and goodbye.